Alright, so this is just kind of a little bit of a bonus video here, and I know that this one is focused almost entirely on modeling, but I think it's important to do just a little bit of rigging setup just so that you get the full feel of a model like this. So as you're building something and you want to be able to build it for a specific look, a specific feel, if there are some key elements to its function that will change the way that looks, I think it's important to have that as a part of the visualization. And that for this ship is going to be the way that these drive pods work. So we know that these parts here are going to extend, and they can go out quite a ways. They can go out 3 meters, as we figured out previously. They can rotate, and then these engines themselves can kind of pivot on the drive shaft. So we want to be able to set that up so that we can actually do that, and that way we can have the feel of how this is going to look in its different flight modes. So in order to do that, I've gone through and done a little bit of cleanup here on this scene. I've taken all of the kind of superfluous pieces that we used at different points during the build and moved those up here into this build items folder. We'll eventually delete that, but I'm going to keep it in here just for right now. But then we've got this wing sweep guides layer, and what this is just a couple of cylinders. And let me go ahead and just hide our inactive meshes for a moment so you can see. And these are the actual cylinders that were used to create the shape and the cutaway inside of, you can see it here, inside of the drive pods, so that the drive shaft here that hooks it up to the vehicle itself, could have a cut in and a shape. I left these cylinders here in a separate layer so that we could use them to be able to set up, our basic rig for this. So there are 2 ways that this is going to need to move, or actually 3. They're going to need to slide in and out, which is pretty simple, and then they're going to need to rotate around the drive shaft, which is that cylinder in there. And then the last thing that they'll need to do is they'll need to be able to pivot on the end there so that the engines can get different angles. All right, so we'll have to set up a locator that will control the rotation of the engines around these cylindrical directions, and then we'll have to set another locator that will control the in and out of the drive shaft, as well as the way that these will pivot. So let's hop over to the Setup tab, and we'll actually start putting this together. So we got a few things over here with our MeshFusion items. We can just move those off to the side for now, because we don't really need those. And we're going to start just by doing this on one side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the cylinders, both forward and the back part. This is actually centered up over the drive shaft, so that that works pretty well. And then what we'll do is take our work plane, and we'll align the work plane to the selection. Okay, and then we're going to drop in a locator, and then what we want to do is set that to the position of the work plane. So under the Setup tab, or the Setup sub-tab here, we'll go to Set to Work Plane Position, and you see that's going to snap right up there where that needs to go. So if I take these drive pods, and we take this locator here, let's pull it up to the top, and we'll call this drive pod L. It's the left one. I could use port and starboard, I guess, but I'm going to stick with left and right for now. And now we're going to take this drive pod, and we're going to put it inside of that. So now if I take this and I rotate it, what we should see is, if we get in here close, and let's go ahead and hide those guides, what we should see is that we get rotation around that cutaway there. So we can get about this far here. So it looks like that's negative 30 degrees, or just a little over, maybe a little bit more, 33 degrees. And then in the other direction, we get a little less, about 15 degrees. So we actually have about 45 degrees worth of angle, and we see actually we don't even get the full 45 when we're in here this close, because it's going to intersect with the body of the ship. So let's go ahead and undo, put that back to 0. So that's the first part. Now the second part is going to be here inside of this these drive shafts here. So we've got this section right here, which is going to which is going to be where we will have our rotation happen, and also where we can slide this in and out. So we're going to create another align work plane to selection. We're going to put another one of these items here. We'll get this locator and we'll call this drive pod L, and we'll call this rotate. All right, so now let's take this and we'll pull it up here. So now that we have that named, we can take and set it to the work plane position. And now I'm actually going to go ahead and just reset my work plane so everything is back where it should be. And now we want our drive pod shaft to be parented to that. All right, and then we want our drive pod rotation control to be parented also to that. So now if I take this piece here, see I slide it in and out, that works. And if I rotate it, that works. And then at the same time, I could take this here and I could rotate along that so that I get all the full range of motion. So you can see we can have them kind of tucked in and angled back, and then we could take this here and we could rotate them around even more. So got a lot of kind of freedom and flexibility with how we're going to maneuver these drive pods now. All right, so let's go ahead and just reset all of those. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in, before I do anything else, I'm going to duplicate these so that I have a left version and a right version here. So let's start here just by duplicating this one. So let's take this one and duplicate it, and this one will be drive pod R, rotate, and we don't need the 2. So let's get rid of that. And on this one, we're just going to take and we're going to invert the X. So let's set the X to negative, and it's going to pop over to the other side, which is just what we want. And then we'll take this one here, and we're also going to duplicate it. Make sure you're not duplicating hierarchy. We just want to duplicate the item itself. So now what we're going to do is we'll take this one here, and we'll drag it up out of the hierarchy. And this one also we want to invert, so let's take and invert the X, put in a negative, make sure that pops to the right spot, which does look correct. And this one, we'll take this one and call it drive pod R. And then we're just going to take this and put it inside of the drive pod rotate. And now I can get my duplicate pieces, so my drive pod sweep, which is my main drive pod here, I can parent to that. And then my drive pod shaft also can be selected, drag into there, and now we've got everything pretty much set up, so we can do real simple animation, so we can at least pose this and get a good idea. Now if we wanted to be able to take this further, we would probably want to go in and set up a simple rig that would give us some sliders, some channel controls, so we could work with this. But for now, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give this a quick test here. So what I'll do here is actually one last thing before we call this something that we can test, is I want to take and zero out all of my transforms on these so that this will be kind of the home position. So I can easily take and reset, get everything back here to being aligned into this kind of flight mode, and then we're ready to go again. So what I want to do is zero out my position since my rotation is already good. So let's take this guy here, the drive pod rotate, and we'll slide it out. We'll slide it out all to the extent that we can go. 3 meters is what we figured. And oops, let's take this guy here and hide it, so we don't need that anymore. Just put inside our build items. Okay, so that works well. All right, so again, let's have a look then at how it rotates. And when these are fully extended, we should have pretty much full range of motion, because when it's fully extended, those 3 meters, none of this is going to overlap with the body at all. So, you know, I could take these and rotate them back to being nearly vertical. I could make them vertical if I want. It just doesn't seem like it looks real good. So I'll just take them back to, you know, 50 degrees or something, and that works. Cool. And now we can go into our secondary control here, and I can control the upward angle, or maybe I want to pivot these downwards now. Just bring it right there. I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to put in negative 30 degrees there, So let's start here just by taking the opposite side here. We'll get our drive pod rotate, and we'll just slide that out 3 meters so that it lines up with the other side. Looks good. And then we'll take and rotate it back. We go to 50 degrees on the other one, I believe. Looks about right. You can real easily just go over and select the other one to check. It looks like 48 degrees. So we'll go in here and put 48 degrees. So that one's rotated up the same way. And then we'll go in here to this one and we'll rotate it down. Looks like we're going to be at 30 degrees here as well. This one will be positive, whereas this side was negative because it's the mirrored. So now you can see my drive pods are fully extended. They're firing downwards. So this is kind of where this thing would be coming in, and it's getting ready to drop off the troops at this point. And I think that works out pretty nicely. Okay, so there you go. As you work on creating models like this, it's important to analyze the function that goes along with the form that you're creating. And by adding in some simple bits of rigging and just testing how some things would animate will allow you to get a good idea of how your form is actually working. So I'm going to take all of these guys now, just select all of these individual elements, and I'm going to reset all. They'll snap right back to where they started, and then we're back into our default flight mode. So that does it for this now. Hopefully you've enjoyed this series. Hopefully it gives you some good insight into a bunch of different ways that you can create and work on your models. Really, you can go with any of the individual ways that we've looked at. You can do polygonal modeling or sculpting. You can work with sub-Ds or with regular polygons. You can work with MeshFusion. Really, the only right tool is the tool that gets the job done for the use case that you need it for at the given time. So hopefully you'll be able to see that kind of using your modeling tools is more kind of like mixed martial arts, and hopefully that will help you to get more out of your modeling tools just in general with any kind of work that you're doing. If it's fun sci-fi stuff, or if it's architectural visualization, or whatever the case may be, whatever you need to use your modeling tools for, just remember that getting the job done is more important than the steps that you take to get there. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.